like typified as like I guess a middle class life, and there were things at that time. I was 7. I didn't know about my father, what he was doing, and so it kind of just all hit. And I have an older brother and a younger sister, and my mom was then, after my father was incarcerated, like forced to move us into an apartment and work like 2 jobs, 3 jobs. So I grew up a latchkey kid for the most part, and this was in Richmond, Virginia, which is where I'm originally from. And at an early age, my dad was kind of like Vietnam vet, came back, grew up in a really strict religious background. My mom was from Long Island. She was from a middle class family, had been exposed to culture. But that experience for me, there were some other experiences before, but that experience for me kind of shifted everything. It kind of just disoriented my view of life, my familial stability, everything that you could know as a 7-year-old child. So it started the journey on me trying to discover meaning. And I think to top that off, my mother in her earlier years was an African dancer. And the reason I want to go back to this, because I think this taps into like the musical and the energetic aspects of my work. So she was a dancer, and she's originally from Long Island and moved down to the Hampton Roads area to go to school at Hampton University. She stayed there for a couple years, didn't finish, but then she met my father and moved to Richmond and became part of an African dance troupe called Izbamutu. And at the time, she had my brother, who was 4 years older than me, and then she had me, and we were considered like the 2 first Izbu babies. And so she was going to class while I was in utero, and then for about a year or 2 after. So I'm sitting there in this space, and there's all this drumming and this dancing and this energy going on. So immediately as a child, and even in utero, I'm getting messages about rhythm, messages about culture, about the feeling of life in a particular way. And so with that kind of cultural influence that went on throughout my life, and then that emotional moment of my father transitioning, it was kind of like I'm finding myself, but I've already been seeded with this kind of sense about life in terms of rhythm and cultural expression. This might have been preparing me for the journey of finding my self-worth, because I ended up using culture and the music and the ideas around me as a stabilizing force or a stabilizing place to kind of like make sense of life. So kind of to fast forward a little bit, my father was incarcerated. My mom worked 2-3 jobs. We grew up latchkey kids. And I want to say around about 13, 14 years old, I had already kind of had inklings of having a different ear for my friends and stuff going on. Most of them wanted to just listen to hip hop. Most of them wanted to listen to what was popular. And I always found myself listening to like a lot of my mom's jazz collection and kind of weird stuff and avant-garde stuff, and like being into like music that wasn't really the mainstream. But I met this kid in my middle school, and he passed a Tribe Called Quest Low in theory to me. And I was like 13, 14 at the time, and I'm around my brother and his friends, and they're listening to like Kool Moe Dee and Kwame and all the stuff that's popular. But then I hear this Tribe thing, and I'm like, oh, there's people out there that are thinking like me. Like, I wasn't really the kind of person who was into like the more rugged, gangster-oriented popular forms of like hip hop or popular music at the time. Like, I knew that the type of art that represented me had to be positive. It had to be reaching for something. It had to be connected to something deeper. I just felt like human potential was so much more than what I was getting influenced by coming up in my community and what was on mainstream TV. So that album blew me away, and it kind of became like a starting point for me to think about, being what we would consider ourselves or labeled as black in society, but like not rolling in the typical narratives, trying to find out a more richer, more diverse world, not just through my own blackness, but just through humanity in general. The stuff I was listening to, the influences I had, were just starting to expand at that point. But that kind of gave me the basis to think, oh, there's something different out there. And I want to be an artist. I want to be an eccentric. I feel these things inside of me. I remember I would watch footage from Woodstock. I would watch anything that was kind of like offbeat in different cultures. people that were looking to use art as ways to develop a connection, to develop a deeper meaning for life, to get through life. That kind of became the thing. And so then I get to high school, and it was my junior year. I ran into a creative writing teacher who got me into writing, and I remember Miss Perkinson. And it was interesting at the time because where I grew up in Richmond was like the Western Henrico, and that was like a working class suburb mixed with like some more upper middle class suburbs. So Richmond's an interesting city, you know, depending on where you go. It has a rich black culture, but it's a very vast city, so it is segregated economically and racially, like most places. But and where I grew up was kind of like this in-between Midtown kind of area where I was like a confluence of like working class people with upper middle class people, kind of just speckled around. So it was, but at the same time, it still had that overarching Richmond feel to it, where it's like there's still this overarching conservative kind of keep it within the box.
Well, it is the seat of the
Confederacy, yeah. So there's that history, that energy there. And then, you know, as you're seeing at the same time, you're seeing like black businesses and black culture. Because I was born in the 80s, I was born in 1980, but I really grew up and took shape in the 90s in terms of being a teenager and a developing teenager. And I saw, you know, special areas where black businesses were downtown just slowly erode over the years and kind of make way for the current gentrification we're seeing today. But it just, you know, when I was a teenager and I got exposed to creative writing and had been through a lot of, you know, struggle and turmoil with my family because they were children of the 60s and 70s and partiers, and it was kind of hard to maintain a stability in my family dynamic, even though the love was there. It was like something about art touched me then. It was like, oh, I think I found a release valve for my imagination, and this will give me a greater sense of self, because I always struggled with self-worth, like finding like just validity and meaning in my purpose in life. You know, on the outside, most people might be like, oh, you know, he's just a cool, happy-go-lucky guy. But to myself, and which I often spend a lot of time with myself as well, I was really searching for that thing that could anchor me. And so it was around that time as a junior in high school that I got into creative writing that it kind of propelled me to start thinking about, not only do I want to do this, but this is kind of like my mission in life, is to use creativity as a form of self-liberation and promote it as a tool of liberation.
Well, you know, I noticed that you relate to jazz very much, and you like to paint with the music and listen to the music. So with that being said, who are your inspirational jazz influences having to do with the music?
First one that comes to mind is really a couple. It's Alice and John Coltrane, without question. There's Sun Ra, there is Pharoah Sanders, there is, you know, the John Coltrane Quartet, Miles Davis, Dorothy Ashby, who's like one of the first kind of well-known jazz harpists. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Satchmo, you know, Dizzy, Charlie, Billy, and then there's just so many names I can name. But to give you the artists that really influenced my direction, I would have to say would be John and Alice Coltrane, for sure.
So I noticed in your background you were a bike messenger here in D.C. So in traveling all around Washington, did you find that the colors, the shapes, the relations to the people, to what you were seeing on the street, did you translate that into your art?
Without question, I think more on a just instinctive level, you know, just being in the midst of the energy. You know, I've always kind of been the type of person, like my father's side of the family who I'm closer to, they were like your kind of conservative, church-going blacks, and like I represented for them kind of like the attitude, like you're growing your hair, you're wearing piercings, like what are you doing, you know? Like this isn't working. And over the years, they just had to accept that I am who I am. But I think I just want to kind of circle back to the question. I already see myself getting a little lost in thought. So what was the question again?
the question was, how did your experience as a
Okay,
bike
thank you.
messenger
Yeah.
relate to all of this beautiful art that you're
Right.
seeing?
So I learned early through my family's influence to kind of just go for myself. Like, I have to be motivated by spirit, not just what I consider, because of my family's attitude, to be like the trappings of society. Like, we have to have the house, we have to have the car, we have to have the degrees, we have to appear to be a certain way, you know, which I understand that that's relevant and important, but for me it was about self-expression and kind of putting what I felt I should be doing first versus like just focusing on making money and making a stable living. So when I moved to DC, you know, the only job that I felt like was for me was to be a bike messenger, because you're outdoors 24/7. I don't have to go to work or wear a uniform. I don't have to wear anything. I don't have to present myself in a way. And it wasn't the best paying job. Like one of my fellow messengers said, it's like the best dead-end job you could ever have. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, we would get paid tons of money, but the experiences I had, being able to kind of be what I would say is like a free radical in a city like DC, really inspired me. The energy of the traffic, making impromptu decisions at a moment's notice, riding through Lafayette Park and seeing protests happen, meeting straight-laced lawyers who have like interesting perspectives on life, going to every embassy, speaking with people from different cultures, seeing artists on the street selling their work, painting, seeing musicians perform, riding through Howard University and knowing that I'm just soaking up all this creative energy from this legacy of DC, and then just the streets of DC, all the punk, all the jazz, all the stuff that's come from here. We may not see it, but it's there. All this energy that's made DC an incredible place that kind of gets overlooked. But riding on the streets definitely informed my work. The energy you see in my work, the pacing of it, is reflective of an intensity that I experienced being a messenger. That's part of it. That's definitely part of it.
So now, I want to get into this. I don't know how many of you know that Khalid is the most interesting person that you will ever meet, because he has so many things going on that I, who have known him for years, have no clue he was doing. So I want you to talk about being off-gridish, okay? And if you don't know what this has to do with Khalid, is that Khalid lives on a piece of land that has nothing on it. I mean, he walked there. To me, I don't know, I mean, when I first started looking at this, I was like, it's like somebody opened the door and said, here, you can live in the park. We're not giving you anything, you're just living there. You have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to find your food, you have to find your water, you have to, this is how Khalid is living. And I couldn't even imagine how you would say to yourself, this is what I'm going to do. However, I want you to talk about the school bus.
Yeah, so for all those that don't know, me and my wife, we purchased land like August 2019. I'm originally from Richmond, so about an hour, 20 minutes south of Richmond. We purchased land. She's been an herbalist for over 25 years and has been exposed to homesteading. I was a city guy who had romantic notions of nature, but once we got together, I started camping and hiking a lot with her, and that really set me off on a pace to be like, well, I don't want to really live this city life anymore. It's kind of losing its appeal. So let's look for land. And so in 2019, we decided to try to find land as cheap as we could. We did not have a lot of money at all, but we had this desire to just break away from the matrix, but just to live a life where our hands and our feet are more directly working with nature. And so we were blessed enough to find something very affordable in Virginia, and we did. And then I think February of 2020, January 2020, COVID hit. And so I'm a messenger, and by this point I had been an artist in DC too, working really hard at connecting with other artists and developing my career. So once COVID hit, I knew that the messenger industry was going to tank, which it did. And we didn't have like a ton of money saved up, so it was like, well, if I'm going to try to do this art thing full time, this is going to be the time, you know, we're going to have to figure this out. So that's what happened. I left my messenger gig in about April, and my wife and kid had went down to already stay with my mother-in-law, and we had already had the property by that point, coming back and forth to DC every weekend, just working on it, trying to clear some areas and camp and do the like. So that's what happened. Like, I moved down to Richmond, and then we stayed with her mother for about, I'd say, a year. Went back and forth to the property, and through that, we had met a neighbor who knew of a guy who had a bus, and we were like, well, we don't have money to put a house on it, let's put a bus on there. And it was a very affordable gig that we got with that bus, and so our neighbor was kind enough at the time to back it up on there and help us get it on there, and then we proceeded to live an off-grid life. You know, we had bought some solar power stations, we were gardening and composting everything, and, you know, just clearing trees when we could. And mind you, this land had already been cut for timber like 14 years before, so it wasn't like these massive trees like I'm a lumberjack now, you know. Like I don't have a sawmill, so it was like these trees were young, so we were cutting them down, making some areas, making some space, got a driveway put in, and the guy was kind enough to clear a little bit of space for us. And that's how we existed for about a year to a year and a half. And I got to go into what you want to talk about or want to mention. We found out about this show on Discovery Channel called Homestead Rescue. So we became fans of the show, just legit fans of the show. The people that run the show are amazing, and they basically go help people who are struggling on their homesteads and try to just improve their circumstances. So I guess we just watched the show and we're fans of it, and I joked with Lucretia one day because I didn't know if the show was still running or not. Like, hey, you know, you should reach out to them. And she's kind of that type of person who will investigate something and just see. So she did. We didn't expect to hear back. We heard back within a month, and then proceeded to talk to the casting people, never expecting to be on the show, and then we ended up on the show. So the episode aired in February of this year, and it was filmed during October. And that was an incredible blessing for us, because I think that's kind of like how my life has been like, and I'm sure a lot of y'all can relate to this. It's like you have this thing inside of you that is like telling you to be you, and that's all. And really, if you walk in tune with that voice, like, the road might not always be the easiest road, but it will reveal and bring things to you. You know, you just have to be willing to, like, sometimes prioritize this over the predictable and the sustainable. Not to your detriment, but you definitely have to put it out there. So long story short, we filmed the episode, and it stars a family of three, a father and his son and his daughter. They have a larger family, but they're the three on the show. They're from Alaska. They've been homesteading their whole lives, and so this is what they do, and they're actually really good people. And they helped to transform our homestead. It's still a lot of work that we do, but it ties into my way of living, I think, is that for me, you know, I had this one time on earth, and I can't really imagine, like, not living it the way that my soul needs it to be. So when I decided I wanted to be an artist, it was like, well, this is all I know. Like, this is all I'm going to do. And it's crazy, and it's been challenging, and it's been very difficult at times, but it's what I know. It's what I do. So I live it. I live it to the fullest. And so off-grid homesteading has been a lot of that. Still a lot of challenges, still a lot of things we're accomplishing, lots of work, but we thrive in that because the mission is to work with nature in a way that makes it feel more organic and holistic. Like, I'm not a studied artist, so to speak. I mean, I do a lot of studying about art and art movements, you know, since I've been serious about it, but I'm what you would consider self-taught. You know, I don't know if those words fit what I do, but
well, wait.
You know, right.
I think that, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, there is no one that can say that you are not an artist, a studied artist, because you are living your art to me every day of the week, every second of every 24 hours of every day, 365 days a year, because art is about creating. And what you have done is you've taken something and you have created a way of life. You have created your own little pocket of the world, so to speak. And for me to see this happen in front of my eyes was just amazing. And to say, oh God, I know that guy. I met that little boy. I met that lady. And to see how much you learned. And I mean, when I say learn, I'm talking about, they said many times during that show that they were trying to get you to the point where you had 3 things on your land, and that was water, food, and shelter. And that is the 3 things that you have to have. And if you can imagine saying to somebody, these are the 3 things that you have to have, and you don't have them, you have to make them. I don't know how many of us could do that.
Yeah.
And that is just, to me, that was amazing. And that elevates your practice as far as being creative, because you have to create shelter. You have to create finding water. You have to create all those things. So how much more creative can you be?
Wow. Well, thank you for that. I think that's the thing. You know, the off-grid life is kind of like a mentality. I'm a big believer that you can apply a lot of these concepts to like any lifestyle. I don't think it's about like everybody's should or could or jump off grid and like do that. If that's where your destiny leads you, like please. But as far as I'm concerned, you can find the same thing in developing computer software. It really just depends on like how the universe is saying to you. Like what is the song, what is your song, and are you going to use that song to help heal and restore and build, or are you going to use it to, maybe be a little bit more destructive and transgressive? So, but the off-grid life has afforded my spirit an opportunity to tap into the deeper meanings behind my work. My work and the philosophies behind it are about freedom, are about liberation from notions, because we grow up, a lot of times we grow up under our community and influences, and we're not sure whether what we're thinking about ourselves or the world around us is our own informed perspective, or is it like information from others. And so I'm always the type to unlearn and relearn, to step back, to reframe. I'm in my head having a busy conversation, and I think if you look at the work, there's a lot of discussion going on, you know what I'm saying? And what's happening, but I think it connects to people because it's not like from this thing feeling like befuddled and depressed and confused. It's more like, no, you can transform these feelings into something that can be liberating and exciting and dynamic and at the same time, meditative. So, that's how I feel about the off-grid life. And when you look at my work, you're seeing all my experiences. You're seeing the countless, because the life of a messenger was similar to the life of a pump set in a lot of ways. Like outside every day, rain, snow, your physical energy and effort goes into how you make your living. I didn't know squat about homesteading. Didn't have much building experience. Didn't have a lot of experience about nature, but I had a drive. So I just kind of took that, just like I took up materials years ago as an artist and said, well, universe, you create, so create through me. Like, if I don't have any boundaries, if nobody's told me you can't do this with color, you can't do this with a brush, how am I supposed to know? That's where pure creativity develops, I think. And I think sometimes that's how, movements or ideas kind of branch off from what is considered the norm and give new possibilities. So if anything, I'm always reaching for my truth. And my truth is because I'm such a big fan of nature and the cosmos, like not just like some far off space type stuff. I mean like this earth and the sun and the moon and the people and the places and the things that are all moving in synchronicity with this cosmic phenomena that's happening around us, to us, through us. I want to tap into that. I want to go back to the original information. I want to go back to the original mainframe, the database, which to me is the ground and what's underneath it, and the insects that are working with it, and the patterns and movements of the celestial bodies in the sky, And how can I untrain myself? Because a lot of us are kind of intimidated by nature because we've lived these lives of modernity so much. How can I challenge myself? It's always a process of growth. So I'm not intimidated by being in places that challenge a lot of my maybe rudimentary fears or concepts. Like, I want to challenge those. I want to transform. Like, it is not to me about being the same. Like, I don't want you to recognize me 10 years from now. I mean, I want you to see me for who I am, my temperament, but I want you to see me as something else because I'm always striving to heal and to grow.
So I know that you took the school bus and made it into a greenhouse.
Yeah,
So is that thriving for Lucretia right now? Are all the plants growing? Hasn't it been almost a year?
No, it's been since October, since it came, and it was like fall time, winter time,
Yeah.
so it wasn't much you could plant at the time.
Right.
And we've like started planting stuff and watering and getting everything going. So things are, propagating and things are developing, because I'm a full-time artist and I just don't do shows. I also teach, I do a lot of paintings. Like, I kind of, because I didn't, develop or cultivate, like, or have, I'm basically inspired by street artists. Like, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Sharif Mamadou, who's an artist from the Ivory Coast who's been painting on the street for years here, but it was coming in contact with him as a messenger and seeing him paint on the street and seeing him be free that kind of inspired me to be like, well, what am I waiting for? This is what I gotta do. So, in line with that, it just comes back to everything that I do is almost like improvised. It's almost like a trust I have with nature. Like, nature is creating every moment.
Well, don't you think that the universe gives you what you want, and that you just have to ask for it? It seems like you asked for this land, you asked to live this life. Somewhere inside of you, both of you, knew that this is how you wanted to live, and you didn't say, go to your parents and say, oh, I need some money to buy. I mean, it happened for you. Do you kind of subscribe to that cosmos attitude of?
Right. I see what you're saying. Well, I think, like, that's the thing about nature is, like, because you're exactly right, but I don't want it to have an undertone of, like, loftiness to it. Like, it's almost like, you might have 10 people who are, I don't know, jumping off a plane skydiving, and 9 of them might make it, and 1 might malfunction and not make it. So I don't know if it's a thing of so much knowing or getting what I want. I think it's like you get everything. You get what you want, what you don't want. You get what you need, what you don't need. And I think the one thing you can do to stabilize yourself is find some kind of practice that can anchor you.
Do you think that your yoga does? I mean, for all of you that don't know, he's also a certified yoga instructor on top of all this other stuff. So, which was like really news to me. So do you think that has helped you to navigate these avenues of stress that happened in your life because of?
Yeah, absolutely. Yoga's played a fundamental part in just making me, always keeping me aware that a lot of the things that we experience outside of, what we're going on in here, and the more attention and love that I can give myself in here, the more I can stabilize myself amidst the shit that might come out, from anywhere, and it kind of gets me away from like personalizing events and things that happen to me, and it gets me to the reality of things happen, and they happen to all of us, and that's okay. But I can always go to myself and, remember that, if I stay in tune with my internal dynamics, which are rooted in nature, my soul, so to speak, that I can navigate the sea of stuff that goes down. So yeah, yoga plays an important role. And like I like the phrase of one yogi. He said, you're really doing yoga when you're away from your mat. So if I'm caught up in life because we homeschool my son, My wife, she has an herbalist business, and she teaches, and we're always kind of traveling back and forth. We're always moving, and we're counting every dime, and we're trying to figure out this and that. But yoga affords me the opportunity to ground myself, and to just further develop it. Because art was the thing before that. But even amidst creating a lot of art, I still have my own personal issues that I was working through. And I realized that, okay, the art was a bridge to a deeper connection, an even more visceral, more real connection with,
So what is your dream as far as your off-gridish, as far as casa off-gridish is? I mean, do you see it? I'm sure that you see it as adding on, and it's definitely going to be always a work in progress.
Yeah.
So what do you see as the next step for you there?
Well, I want to cultivate a space where, people can come and, escape city life. And, if they haven't been exposed to life, give them an opportunity to spend time in nature. If they want to learn about growing food, if they want to learn about how to build structures, or just really just genuinely get away for a minute. My vision is to make it, in addition to what Lucretia wants to do, which is like, have apprenticeships there and herbalist apprenticeships, is to also make it an artist residency, where...
That's what I was hoping to hear you say.
Yeah. Artists can come and, just, be submerged in their work. And I kind of want to promote it for artists, who are definitely, self-cultivated, self-taught. It could be any discipline, really, or just artists who I see that are like really passionate about what they're doing and whether the end goal manifests itself or not. Like, you're an artist, like you do this thing, you do it. So like to have somebody like you there to be able to, get into your work, but yet step outside and just put a fire on the fire pit and look at the stars, So I want to, that's what I want to do with it. I also want it to be a place where I teach intuitive painting workshops. If you want to say that, I'm more like encourage intuitive painting workshops. So I would like to do those there, have people come and use art as a source of, like, I know the term art therapy is kind of overused, but it's really just like art release, You don't have to know what you're doing. You don't have to have any concept. I want you just to create, because it's a way to channel energy. So it's a way to release, energy. And I think that's really important because I drew, coming up, but I never I think it was around about 2005 or 6. I used to try to do representational stuff, and it was cool. But then after I saw Sharif, it was just like, I just want to paint what I want to paint, man. Like, I don't know. I mean, it was like, this is how ignorant I was, y'all. Like, I'll go to the art store, and I remember I got my first set of oil paints. I come back, got my oil paints, got my canvases, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do this stuff. And so I got like a jar of water, and I'm like taking oil and like putting it in the water. I'm like, why does this stink? What's going on like this? And so I went back to the art shop, and he's like, yo, dude, you can't use water. You know what I'm saying? He was like, you gotta use, paint thinner. You know what I'm saying? And it was like, but I just kind of was like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, it's something about, like, in the tarot deck, the first card is the Fool. And that's the most important card to me in the deck, because it always deals with, I don't know, but that if I don't know, that doesn't mean it can't happen. I don't know doesn't necessarily have to elicit feelings of fear. It could elicit feelings of hope and desire and a surety that I'm manifesting this, some way.
So I think that all of us can agree that Khalid is probably the most interesting person you've run into in a long, long time. I mean, really. So I'd like to open it up. Do you guys have any questions of him? I know you must have some questions.
Yeah, please. There's work or pieces that you're intrigued by. If you just want to know where my head was at, or like how I mean, I can always go deeper into some of the things we discussed. So please feel free to ask me whatever you want.
Don't be shy. Come on. Okay.
Sad.
Can you come into the mic?
What is
How
your
you
name
doing?
first?
My name's Ian. We were talking at your opening about this piece. I think it's spontaneous combustion.
Yes.
Yeah. And you were describing. And I wanted to write everything you said down, of course. But you were describing how you have the format of jazz and something else. Can you dig all the way into that?
Yeah, sure. So this piece was made in 2018 at a jazz spot in Philly called Philly South. It's like a soul food restaurant, but they also host a lot of jazz musicians there. And I had the honor of doing 2 sets with a pretty prominent saxophonist by the name of Teodros Avery. Yeah. Yeah. We've worked a few times together.
God.
Yes. So, yeah. And he found out about me through Instagram. It was crazy. It was one of those situations where I follow jazz, so he happened to just go on my page. Oh well, we definitely have to talk a lot more of this. He'll trip. But so it was kind of cool because he had debuted his album that night, and it was a night after the rain. It was a tribute album to John Coltrane. So basically, he said what he loved about my performances was the pacing and the application of color. It had a feeling of jazz to it. Now, I do want to say what I mean by jazz. It doesn't just mean the music. I consider punk music to be jazz. I consider blues to be jazz. I consider classic rock, classical West African music, traditional Japanese music. I mean, anything. The wind, there's an artist that I've followed for a long time, Jack Whitten, and he said, jazz is a philosophy. You could call it Taoism, you could call it Buddhism, you could call it secularism, you could call it nothing. It's just a reaction to the energy of life. But this piece was painted in that space. We did 2 sets, and this was the second one. The other one I was blessed to sell, but this one is still with me, and that was a very meaningful night because he played some really impactful songs like Africa Brass, which is one of my favorite Coltrane tracks. And basically I was up there on stage with them, painting in time and in tune with them. And what I try to do is, because my love for, life and energy, and in particular, since we're speaking about jazz is so strong, I feel like I have to channel that energy and encode it on canvas. Sound travels and dissipates, but when you make a work of art, if the circumstances are fit, it can stand the test of time and kind of be like a historical document for a moment. So the live painting for me is the opportunity to use a vehicle of jazz and of music to liberate myself, but to also focus on the same principles, like improvisation within a structure. For all the musicians that are here, the canvas is a structure. I use the colors and the strokes, like artists may use notes and chords or different things that they play to kind of create a harmony and a melody. But for me, art gave me an ability to express what I wanted in a way that would be unique and maybe reach the viewer in a more unique situation. So I hope that answers kind of what I was, getting into. But jazz, yes, is very important. What you're looking at is, in essence, visual jazz. It's supposed to constantly stimulate and titillate and have a conversation with every level of yourself. The deeper you go into the work, the deeper you go into where I'm at. And where I'm at primarily is dealing with like the cosmos. And I mean that in the sense of like the actual phenomena, black holes, supernovas, gamma ray bursts, solar flares, lunar and solar eclipses, plate tectonic shifts, thunderstorms, the way, insects move, the way we move as people. I just have kind of let my, younger social political consciousness erode and kind of see the oneness in everything. Like I use this term often, if you follow me on social media, like maximum oneness. And I think people that hear that term oneness, they go, oh, he's talking about like home and all that. And it's like, no, I mean oneness, like everything is happening right now. I don't care if it's beautiful or if it's horrible. I don't care if I can understand it or I can't put my hands on it. It's happening, and that energy is being pushed and moved by something that is greater in its awareness than all of us. But yet, and to some reason that fascinates me. You know, that really fascinates me. You know, so, and I think that's why it connects to me going back to nature, trying to live in nature. What more can I learn? What more can I dissolve? How more can I embrace this actual reality?
It's called lifelong learning.
Yeah, for sure.
So do we have any other questions for Khalid?
Can I follow up?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So how do you've explained more than the
It goes
yes,
there, yeah.
right? But like, how do you get there? How did you come to that?
Okay.
Like, you said a lot, and you've explained some of it. You know what I'm saying?
Right, but let me give you some reference points that are a little bit more grounded into reality, because I tend to go, way out there. So, visually speaking, like the artists that inspire me, I don't know if you've ever heard of the abstract expressionist movement. There was this period in which we would call modern painting, that was called post-war abstract expressionism. And at the time, a lot of artists in New York City were trying to mimic the temperament of a lot of the jazz musicians and musicians they were listening to at the time. So there's an artist by the name of Jackson Pollock. And there's two of them, Jackson Pollock and Franz Klein. But Jackson Pollock more so because of the type of practice that he did, which was called gestural abstract expressionism, which means that the gesture that you create, the paint and the brush are an extension of that, and you try to capture the energy and the dynamism and the movement through the act onto the canvas. And you do it in a way that's liberated, it's free, it allows you the space to experiment, but to also channel energy, whether it's frustration, pain, happiness, whatever, to the canvas. So, I've always kind of had visions of doing live painting work like that. And I think a lot of it was trying to liberate myself from any known forms of behavior, but let that sentiment, let the beauty of that sentiment show. And what I mean by that is, what you're getting into, man, is the jazz temperament. So jazz for me, when I see Coltrane play, or when I listen to Coltrane play, I feel like, and I don't know how familiar you are with Coltrane's music, but I'm kind of trying to put a bridge between Jackson Pollock and that time. So this is what I'll do. I won't go over. But Ornette Coleman is also a well-known saxophonist. He actually had a piece of Jackson Pollock on his album entitled Free Jazz. I think it was. There's an actual Jackson Pollock work. So artists at that time and musicians at that time were trying to work off of each other. And so my approach comes from that, is kind of birthed from that kind of approach, that way of thinking. That the paint and the color and the way that I apply it, if I apply it with a certain level of immediacy and energy, there's a catharsis around that. And when I match that with the music that also is of that same essence, then it just elevates it. It takes it somewhere else. So Spontaneous Combustion is the name of that painting, and what I'll do is I'll explain the process to you. So when the music starts and I'm looking at a blank canvas, the first thing I'm thinking about doing is, allowing my gestures to be very long and broad because there's so much space to work with. So I might apply like big swaths of black or red or color. It's just like a base element, just to provide a foundation of energy. And as the painting builds, my strokes get more smaller and detailed, but they're still kind of fast. And what basically happens is this buildup of energy and tension and intensity that kind of comes together somehow. And when I'm in the moment, I'm thinking, okay, I need to apply black or I need to apply red, because I don't really mix colors too much, especially with my live paintings, because I want there to be that boldness and contrast there. I want every color in the work you to see it. I want you to see how the colors play off of each other. I want there to be a visual, and that's kind of what I mean by visual jazz. It's a polyrhythmic, polyphonic, polychromatic feel, and then the gestures are added there to add swing and to add movement and to add energy and to add intensity, so that it gives you a further point to investigate, or to be immersed in. I want it to be an experience when you're looking at the work. So I hope that kind of helps to elucidate or kind of clarify what I mean in terms of what I'm doing when I'm doing my live work.
Do you start with a mental image, a mental picture of what colors you're going to use in any one piece? Or, I mean, you mentioned the fact that you were hanging out with Mr. Avery. And did you say, well, okay, well, I don't know, his music makes me feel a certain way or feel a certain color, and start with that color, or just use every single color? I mean, how do you decide which tubes of paint you're going to take to a gig?
Yeah, well, it's like feeling, you know? I remember Jean-Michel Basquiat said, he was asked about his art, and he was like, somebody had asked Miles, like, how do you know what to play? How do you, and it's just kind of like, I don't, these things come to you, I'm being guided, I'm allowing the essence of creation to guide me in that moment. And over time, just like with anything in life, whether you're improvising or you're very calculated, it gets refined. The practice gets refined. It was always about releasing tension and getting it out. So, over time, I was able to cultivate a language, but I'll be painting and I'll put down red and something will say, okay, well, now we need to add some yellow. All right, I got this very dark color, let me add this very bright color. And let me start to add and stroke. But so it's happening in real time. It's not like, sometimes I'll look at the canvas right before the music starts and I might say, okay, I'm gonna go with red or something like that. But it's happening in real time. I'm not putting too much emphasis on like, I'm gonna make it look like this. I don't know what's gonna happen until it happens. And I need that to happen in order for it to come off. It's gotta feel like it's alive.
So I noticed that in some of these works you have elements of collage in them, and what made you decide to turn into this actual visual representation of an eye, a face of something? What made you decide to do that?
Right. Well, my wife, she's good afternoon. My wife is she was a sculpture major at VCU, so she's had a profound influence on how my work kind of developed from just a pure painterly aspect to, okay, I'm gonna start incorporating like physical material into my work. A lot of the images and pictures that you see that might be encoded or kind of obstructed in the work, some of that is just to add texture and volume, but a lot of it is like reference points. There might be pictures of people from the diaspora doing any kind of task. There might be pictures of space, in particular cosmic phenomena. I use a lot of records in my work. It's just a way to give volume and kind of like emphasize the musical nature of the work. And I don't like to rely on the mixed media that I use, whether it's fabrics or whatever, to like rely on them as pictorial elements. So I'll paint over a lot of it. I'll, obstruct it and the images in there because I want you to kind of go into the work and peruse it and see like, oh, is that a face? Is that what's going on? And a lot of that is because of just the nature of how I think I view myself as a so-called black person. A lot of it has to do with so much about history is unknown to all of us. And if you are considered or labeled, which is black of the diaspora in this society, and probably most of the first world, there's a lot of, it's just distortion. It's like, where do I go to find that origin story? Where do I go to find that connection and that link? And since so much of it is about not really knowing, I take a lot of these referential images that I might find of people from the diaspora, and I obstruct and paint over it because there is an obstruction there. And underneath the surface, those connections are there, but they're not like as literal and logical and chronological, as they might be for some other cultures.
Well, do you think that that's ancestral coming out in you when you are painting, since you are saying that you have this obstruction that's going on in the work that you don't know where that's really coming
Yeah, I do. I do think it is ancestral. I do, as I've been, doing art, it always felt like it was coming from a place of, I'm speaking a language that was like infused into me from a long generation of people who've come before me. And I'm just giving it this contemporary feel that's reflective of how I'm experiencing society and the times. So yeah, absolutely. I think for me as a Black person, you hear a lot of narratives about who you are, where you come from, what you could possibly be, and that is always expanding for me as to what that is. To the point of where it's just like, hey, we're just all human beings, we're just all here. But at the same time, we exist in a lot of these, schisms and paradigms. So I have to deal with that, and as I reckon with those things, I hold on to the source that, we've had to cultivate and maintain a lot of pride, even if it's just for the label, even if you're just labeled other in any society, you have to cultivate a pride that can resist the circumstances around you so that you can make way for future generations, even if it's not really your intention to make way for future generations. It might just be to preserve your identity. It might just be to hold true to your own values. But coming from my family's background, of entrepreneurs on both sides of my family and people who were involved in their communities, I think it's just that spirit is transmitted to me, and this is how I'm expressing it. So there is a lot of pride of, being Black, so to speak. There's a lot of pride in that, but I just don't want to use the images and the emblems to kind of speak for that. I want it to take part in the energy. I want the images to become a part of the painting. They don't necessarily have to be standalone. They can incorporate themselves. And if you investigate the work and you see those images and you see broken records and you see all that, records are historical documents. The word record, whether it's records that are on file for something, but also records that span their historical documents. They're absorbing the sounds and the frequencies of that expression in that cultural context in that time. So some of them are, put in there to show that that's what I'm doing, is I'm transmitting cultural information, I'm transmitting sonic information, I'm transmitting, visual information. So they all kind of play a role in my mind.
So during this whole COVID thing that was going on, were you off-gridish at that time?
Yeah, well, like I was saying, once, I think May of 2020 is when I officially left my messenger job and moved to Virginia. And for about, 6 or 7 months, we were back and forth from my mother-in-law's house, and then we moved to the land full-time in October of 2021. So I spent a lot of time at the land before we officially moved there, but in October 2021, we're there full-time. Just out there living. And like you said, with water, we didn't have a well system, so we would catch water with tarps and have these IBC totes, and I dug a garden myself and removed the stumps, and we started planting stuff, and then we built our own compost bins, and all of that for me was an attempt to gain a greater intimacy with the physical nature of Earth, to the best of my ability, to the best of my understanding, and to continue to move forward in that vein, even if it was something that intimidated me or made me uncomfortable.
Well, have you pulled out that swoop bow that you got?
Yeah. I ain't shot no deer yet, you know what I'm saying? But it is something that I plan to do, yes. I have been practicing my bow and arrow quite a bit, and to honor nature by respecting, my animal brothers and sisters, but understanding that energy consumes energy in order to stabilize itself. So the earth consumes us. Everything, flesh, vegetables, all of it is living and aware and conscious, and we're all in tune of it. And I think we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit in the world, realizing we're just a part of the...
Well, what I found very interesting was when they talked about this harvesting protein.
Yeah, sure.
That they gave you a bow and arrow and not a gun.
Right.
And I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Because it would have been really easy for them to say, oh, here's the shotgun, and just like
Right.
blow it away.
Right.
But you have to use some kind of thought, skill, and practice in order to deal with that. And that's kind of what the indigenous people in this country had to do.
Mm-hmm.
Indigenous people on the continent had to do.
Mm-hmm.
They had to use some kind of skill and practice, much like this, to harvest that protein.
Yeah, I think there's always been in me the desire to kind of tap into, you know, the ways of nature or the ways that humans dealt with nature that had a greater simplicity to it. Yeah, bow hunting for me is, you know, respective of, like, you know, I hear hunters out there, you know, say, hey, you know, if you shoot guns, the deers won't come back because it'll leave powder residue and the sound is loud and it just disrupts. To me, it's like I'm not out there trying to, you know, harvest deer for the sake of trophy. I'm doing it with the ultimate respect that, with the ultimate respect that this deer is offering its life and that I can then process and provide that food for my family, and the meat and the level of fitness that those animals are in is, you know, they eat the very plants and fruits and berries and things that are around. So, you know, you're getting all that nutrition too. So, you know, for me to learn it from a more craft-like standpoint, not saying that guns don't have a level of craft to them, because everything does, but I mean, you know, to do it in that way that, you know, focuses more on me, you know, being stealth, understanding the patterns of how the animals move, and, you know, not filling them with tons of lead, you know. It's more in line with my ethics, I think.
So does anyone else have any questions for Khalid? If not, oh.
Yeah, sure, please, feel free.
All right, so I hope this has an artistic application, but it might be more of a kind of psychological question.
Sure.
You mentioned two things I really kind of identify with. One being kind of recognizing that society really deeply and broadly encourages and values conformity, and, you know, growing up knowing that you're kind of an outlier in some way, and not feeling like you're ever going to conform in the way that is expected of you, and then also struggling with self-worth.
Sure.
And, you know, maybe if it's not a struggle, but it's something that you're constantly aware of, and it's a prominent fact in your psyche, and how you reconcile those two things and how it's presented in your work.
Right. Well, thank you first and foremost. But I think it's a thing. I mean, especially for artists, but I'm sure for all people. You know, like, life can be a maze. You know, like, it can be a maze at times, and I think this goes in, like, I don't know if it's just like this social optimism that people have. It's like, you know, everything works out at the end of the show, sitcom kind of vibes. I don't know if that's just TV, years of television, years of movies, or what. But I feel like a lot of us have gotten away from the genuine ebb and flow of life. Like, you know, I follow the Tao Te Ching for all those who don't know too much about Taoism, Lao Tzu, but I follow some of his teachings, and there's a quote, and I think it just comes to me, but it's like, fill your bowl to the brim and it'll spill. You know, keep sharpening your knife and it'll blunt. You know, I think it's more like, you know, worry about money and security and your heart will never unclench. You know, there has to be a part of understanding that you have to be active in life and you got to do what you got to do, but you can't make that circumvent the actual events of nature. You know, you build your sandcastle and the waves come to take it. You know, if you're still alive, build another one. If you're not, then life goes on. And I think the way that art has allowed me to express what I feel like to me is the pulse of creation, to access that. And I think that's why I do the live paintings, to access that momentary, omniscient, omnipresent pulse of nature. But that keeps me grounded to the fact that, like, hey, you know, everything that might be going around me might not be like the way I want it or the way I need it to be, but it's the way. And that way has given birth to this and to my life and to my circumstances. And so if it's doing it for me, it's doing it for everybody else. So I don't trip over what other people do, really. I mean, of course, I have my views and perspectives on what is productive and what may be unproductive, but it ain't for me to hold that against them. So for me, what I do is I just say, okay, let me continue to find ways to learn to love or further love myself, further grow, further be okay with the fact that my family and friends might not understand how I'm doing something. Because eventually, if I tap into that source and that energy over time, they may not understand it, but they have to respect it. Because I'm going to do me. And I think you got to be okay with doing you, like fall in love with you. It's a process, but it's important. You know, it's essential, because otherwise you'll be getting pulled by everything and everybody else. You know, so finding that grounding within yourself is important.
Well, on that note, I would like to thank you for sitting down and having this canvas conversation with me. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Always.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Your work
Always.
is amazing, and I'm thankful.
And I want to also acknowledge the fact that we have some amazing artists in the audience today.
Yes.
Edmund Nasser, fabulous artist,
That's my God. Thank you for coming.
and this gentleman,
Yes, yeah, who had a show here recently, you know. So,
Shamari.
yeah, thank you for coming. I appreciate that. It means a lot. And shout out to my man Thomas Stanley in the back.
And I'd like to also thank Adrian Ferguson for allowing us to inhabit your space. It's always a pleasure to be at the Art of Noize. It's one of the most special places in DC, and I really do love it. So thank you so very much to all of you for coming out, and to Khalid for showing us how to live off-gridish. So let's give him a warm round of applause. And I hope you guys enjoyed yourself this afternoon, because I certainly did enjoy being here with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. It means a great deal. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, let's have another round of applause, please, please, please. Let's thank our host, Ms. Greta Chapin-McGill, and our featured artist, Mr. Khalid Thompson. Yes, 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 yes. Again, my name is Adrian Ferguson. I'm the owner here at Art of Noize. I'm so honored that you spend your Saturday afternoon with me. All right, I'm going to make it worth your while. I promise. I promise. Please feel free to ask Khalid as many questions as you like. Please absorb the work. We have QR codes around the room where you can get plenty of information about the show. All right. So on that note,
What's up about tomorrow?
and also yes, we're going to plug tomorrow. We're going to do that individually, but I'm glad that now I got the mic.
Yeah.
Khalid is going to be doing a live painting. Every month we have a open mic. And tomorrow is our monthly open mic here at Art of Noize from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Our featured artist is going to be doing a live painting in performance with our DJ and our house band. So if you're available, please come on out, support, and we'd love to see you. All right? Please, we have some libations in the back, some beautiful art, so let's have a great time. All right.
Thank everybody for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, man. Thank you.
I'm sorry? Oh, man, it's just